Nico, we've been here at the Press Club in Brussels here today discussing the issue of Chinese Communist Party and the programme of forced organ harvesting. You yourself presented a video which showed clear evidence that doctors in China, transplant specialists, were deliberately targeting Falun Gong, and even one reference to patients, that is donors, being as young as 15 years. How can that information that you presented, where do we go from this? What do we do with this information? How do we disseminate this? Because it seems to me that there's not enough awareness in general society about this issue.
Yeah, well, I would say, first of all, I think it's very important for us to actually understand what is going on here. Like I said during my speech as well, for us to understand how the Chinese Communist Party is actually dehumanizing Falun Gong to such an extent that these doctors are not even aware anymore of the fact that they're actually doing something wrong. They're just following the party narrative, they're just following the party guidelines. So for us to understand that this is what's happening makes it also possible for us to actually grasp that this is something that has to be stopped by all means. I think there are a lot of people, like for instance doctors, surgeons right here in the West who hear about forced organ harvesting, and they have the reaction like, okay, it sounds so surreal that I'm just gonna turn around and walk away. And we've seen this happen far too often. It's the easiest way to deal with these kinds of atrocities. They sound so hard to believe that people have the tendency to just, turn their heads and walk away. There are other reasons there. There's possibly the influence of China to the rest of the world right now. We see that in institutions. We see that through the Belt and Road Initiative. They're everywhere. They're even in our universities. So it's really hard to create a breakthrough so that the international community can actually act on that. The only thing that we can do from our side is create more awareness and try to make clear to the world that this is actually happening today. And this video that we showed it cannot get any clearer than that, right? Also, the date about the video is very striking. This is January 2020 when the recording was made. A few weeks later, the whole world shut down with the pandemic, right? So it cannot be any more recent than that. Also, China is opening up now after the pandemic. They needed more time, right? They had their very strict COVID restrictions. But once it will go back to normal, this organ harvesting will probably also continue just like before.
Nico, the lawyer Carlos Iglesias from Doctors Against Forced Organ Harvesting, he referred to the Chinese Communist Party as a serial killer on a massive scale. He said that organ harvesting was a crime against humanity, a real genocide. And he then used words which, to us as Europeans, are very chilling. He referred to organ harvesting as the Communist Party's final solution against Falun Gong. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, what they're actually doing, you might call it like that. It is a kind of genocide, right? Actually, the China Tribunal came out with their final report. They didn't use the term genocide, as far as I understood, simply because you cannot call Falun Gong practitioners as part of one ethnical group, which is something that is within the definition of genocide. It has to be there. It's worse, right? Because we're talking about people from all over China. This is not one ethnical group. We are talking about, when it's about Falun Gong, there are practitioners all over China. This was so popular in the 90s that Falun Gong was practiced all over China. So it definitely is a way of eradicating Falun Gong. Like I said, Jiang Zemin, who started the persecution, he talked in the Great Hall of the People directly about it to everyone, for everyone to hear. He said, ruin their reputation, ruin them financially. People's lives were destroyed. They lost their job, they lost everything. But if necessary, he said, ruin them physically. If you say that about a human being, then that means that you no longer consider that person a human being, but some kind of a I don't know, some kind of an illness in society that needs to be eradicated. And that's exactly how the Chinese Communist Party has looked upon Falun Gong. They want it removed out of society. They want it gone. They didn't manage to do it. Jiang Zemin said, we're going to have it done within 3 months. 3 months became 6 months, 6 months became a year, and 1 year is now 23 years. Soon in July, it'll be 23 years that the persecution is still is ongoing. And it's still, Falun Gong practitioners are still there, right? The Chinese Communist Party is anti-human. They have lost, or they have made a lot of people in China lose every sense of morality. And Falun Gong practitioners, on the other hand, are upholding morality. They are living by truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance, trying to live up to these traditional norms and values. And they're being persecuted for it. They're being organ harvested for it, and they are being eradicated for it, right? So in this regard, you might say modern China has become a completely world upside down. And what they are doing to Falun Gong practitioners indeed is completely trying to eliminate them. If they can do it by doing organ harvesting and first of all turning them into a multi-million-dollar industry, then that's even better for them. For the Chinese Communist Party, that's the new mantra. To be rich is glorious, right? It goes all hand in hand with each other. Anti-human, to be rich is glorious, you make money out of this, and you kill those people that the party has targeted for repression, you're just following the party guidelines, and you are in China considered as a Chinese patriotic citizen. This is what it's all about, and that's how the people in China have been deceived, and how in reality it is a genocide. That's what's going on.
Of course, the other human rights issue which is unfolding in China, which is getting a great deal of attention, of course, is the persecution of the Uyghurs.
Yeah.
Now that, of course, is under the terms of the UN definition. That is a genocide, isn't it?
Yeah, that is. And there you can see also, I remember very briefly a reaction of David Matas, who was one of the initial investigators of organ harvesting in China. He co-wrote, together with David Killow, the first report that came out about organ harvesting in 2006. And he said, if the international community would have taken the issue of the persecution of Falun Gong seriously and would have really put their foot down and stood up against the CCP about this, then maybe then what we see now happen with the Uyghurs might not have happened. Because what they did is they just draw the line and they said, okay, fine, let's pull it through. Now we can do the same thing with the Uyghurs. No one's paying attention anyway. And they see the same thing happening all over again right there in Xinjiang. It's, like I said, it's, the CCP is a dehumanizing organization. It's anti-human. It has to be stopped. Of course, we cannot do it from here. This probably has to be done by the Chinese people themselves. The only thing we can do is make people aware that the CCP is doing this. And of course, with the influence here in the West, we have to be very, very careful about what's going on today. That's another thing, right? I remember a picture from students in Hong Kong who were just leaving their university after the police was chasing them off, and they had graffiti on the wall. And there's a picture taken by a journalist, and that picture said, "Dear world, be aware or be next." And this is something that we have to really be aware of. This is not science fiction, you know. Chinese Communist Party, through the Belt and Road Initiative, through their influence all over the world, they are trying to export that China model. Let's hope that it doesn't come that far. It won't be a kind of world that you want to raise your children in, I can tell you that.